Imagine you're making breakfast. The coffee is brewing. The eggs are ready. You reach into the refrigerator, grab a package of bacon, and place it on the counter. Then your phone lights up with a breaking news alert. Thousands of pounds of bacon recalled. Suddenly, breakfast doesn't feel quite the same. Should you throw it away? Is bacon actually dangerous? Have we been getting this wrong all along? Those are reasonable questions. But they're not the first questions I asked. As a physician, I've learned that when a food suddenly becomes the hero or the villain, the headline is almost never the whole story. And that's exactly what happened here. The recent bacon recall made national news, but it wasn't triggered by a sudden discovery that bacon causes heart disease. It wasn't because scientists uncovered some new hidden danger. In fact, this particular recall involved an import inspection requirement, a regulatory issue that's very different from the kind of contamination most people imagine when they hear the word recall. That's an important distinction, because a recall should make us curious, not automatically afraid. And that's when I realized something. Most people don't really understand bacon. They don't know why it's cured. They don't know why uncured bacon may not mean what they think it means. They don't know how to compare one package with another at the grocery store. They don't know what happens to bacon once it hits a hot skillet. And they certainly don't know how to separate a scary headline from good science. So today, we're going to investigate bacon together, not to convince you to eat it, and not to convince you to avoid it. My goal is something much bigger. I want to help you understand it. Because the biggest problem with bacon isn't bacon, it's oversimplification. By the end of this episode, you'll know how bacon is made, how to shop for it, how to cook it more thoughtfully, and most importantly, you'll have a framework for thinking more clearly the next time any food makes headlines. Welcome to Food Under the Microscope. Let's begin where every food investigation begins, at the very beginning of the story. Long before bacon ever reached your breakfast plate, it solved one of humanity's biggest problems. Not flavor, survival. For most of human history, there was no refrigerators, no freezers, no grocery stores. If a family harvested an animal, they had one challenge. How do you keep hundreds of pounds of meat from spoiling? The answer changed civilization. Salt. Salt didn't just make food taste better. It pulled moisture from the meat, making it much harder for many harmful bacteria to grow. That simple discovery allowed families to preserve food for weeks or even months, helping communities survive winters, long journeys, and seasons when fresh food was scarce. In fact, salt became so valuable throughout history that it influenced trade, economies, and even language. The English word salary is commonly linked to the Latin word salarium, reflecting the historic value placed on salt. Rather, every detail of that story is debated by historians. One thing isn't. Without salt, food like bacon might have never become part of our culinary history. Eventually, people discovered something else: smoke. Smoke didn't just add incredible flavor. It helped dry the meat and contributed additional preservation, creating foods that lasted longer while developing the aromas we still associate with bacon today. But before any of that could happen, there had to be the right cut of meat. Bacon comes from the pork belly, a naturally layered cut of muscle and fat. Those alternating layers are why bacon becomes both tender and crisp when cooked. And here's something many people never consider. Not every pork belly starts the same. The pig's genetics, its diet, its environment, its overall health all influence the final product. Just as grapes affect the flavor of wine, or coffee beans influence the taste of your morning cup, the story of bacon begins long before processing ever starts. Food has a history, and understanding that history helps us ask better questions than simply, is bacon healthy? Because the next chapter of the story reveals something that surprises almost everyone: the chemistry that transformed pork belly into bacon, and why one of the most misunderstood words on a bacon package may not mean what you think. Now our pork belly has reached the stage where it becomes bacon. But that transformation didn't happen by accident. It happened because generations before us learned a lesson through experience and later science. Salt was an incredible preservative, but it wasn't perfect. One of the greatest threats to preserved meat was a bacterium called Clostridium botulinum. which can produce one of the most powerful toxins known in medicine. Researchers eventually discovered that nitrite was remarkably effective at preventing this dangerous organism from growing in properly cured meats. In other words, curing wasn't developed to make bacon look pink or fool consumers. It became an important part of making preserved meat safer. Now here's where millions of shoppers become confused. You walk into the grocery store and see two packages. One says cured, the other says uncured. Most people naturally assume the second package contains no nitrites, but that's often not what it means. Many products labeled uncured are made using celery powder or celery juice. Those ingredients naturally contain nitrate, which is converted during the curing process into nitrite, the same molecule that performs the curing reaction. From a chemistry standpoint, your body doesn't recognize whether that nitrate originated from celery or from a purified curing salt. It's still nitrite. That doesn't mean every bacon product is identical. Far from it. Different recipes, ingredient quality, smoking methods, added sugars, and manufacturing practices all influence the final product. But it does teach us an important lesson. Marketing terms don't always tell the whole story. Understanding the process does. So instead of asking, is this cured or uncured, ask questions that matter more. How many ingredients are there? Is sugar added? How heavily is it processed? How transparent is the manufacturer? Those questions generally tell us much more about the product than a single word printed on the front of the package. And now our bacon has completed another chapter of its journey. It's cured. It's smoked. It's sliced. It's packaged. And finally, it arrives somewhere every one of us has stood countless times, the grocery store. Now our bacon has finally reached the grocery store. And this is where the story changes from chemistry to decision making. Because standing in front of dozens of packages, most shoppers do exactly what food marketers hope they'll do. They read the front of the package. Natural, premium, applewood smoked, uncured. Those words certainly sound reassuring. But as a physician, I've learned that the most important information is almost never on the front of the package. It's on the back. So let me show you how I think. The first thing I read is the ingredient list. In general, I prefer shorter ingredient lists with recognizable ingredients. That doesn't automatically make a food healthy, but it often means there's less unnecessary complexity. Next, I look for added sugar. Some bacon contains only trace amounts used during processing. Others contain brown sugar, maple syrup, honey, or other sweeteners in more meaningful amounts. If you're trying to improve insulin resistance, manage diabetes, or follow a ketogenic or carnivore lifestyle, that's worth noticing. Then I look at the nutrition facts. Not because I'm afraid of fat. I'm asking practical questions. How much protein am I getting? How much sodium does this contribute to my overall day? And what serving size is this label actually describing? Let's be honest, most people don't eat exactly 2 slices. So knowing the serving size simply helps you understand what you're actually consuming. Finally, I think about the manufacturer. No food company is perfect, as this recall reminds us. But companies that invest in quality control, communicates openly when problems arise, and respond quickly to recalls tend to earn more confidence over time. Notice something. I never once asked whether this bacon was good or bad. Instead, I asked better questions, because better questions usually lead to better decisions. And there's one more question almost nobody asks. Can the way you cook bacon change what happens inside it? The answer is absolutely yes. So when you shop, don't ask which package looks healthiest. Ask which package gives me the most information to make an informed decision. That's how clinicians approach evidence. All right, our bacon has made it home. Now the science changes once again, because the moment bacon touches a hot pan, you're no longer just cooking it, you're changing it. One of the first things you'll notice is that bacon begins to shrink. Have you ever wondered why? It's not because someone shorted you at the grocery store. It's because you're watching chemistry happen in real time. Water evaporates. Fat slowly renders. Proteins tighten as they're heated. That's why the strip becomes smaller, while the flavor becomes more concentrated. Then something wonderful begins to happen. The surface turns golden brown. It's called the Maillard reaction, a natural chemical reaction between amino acids and sugars that creates hundreds of new flavor and aroma compounds. In fact, scientists have identified well over 100 volatile compounds that contribute to bacon's unmistakable aroma. before you ever take a bite. Your brain is already responding to what your nose detects. That's one reason bacon smells so irresistible. But here's where balance matters. The Maillard reaction gives us incredible flavor. Too much heat for too long can push that chemistry further than we want. When bacon becomes heavily blackened or charred, oxidation increases, and compounds such as advanced glycation end products, heterocyclic amines, and under some cooking conditions, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons can also increase. Now let's keep this in perspective. This doesn't mean you should panic if one strip gets a little darker than planned. And it certainly doesn't mean bacon suddenly becomes toxic before it's crispy. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is avoiding unnecessary burning. Therefore, I usually recommend cooking bacon over moderate heat, allowing the fat to render gradually instead of trying to rush the process. If you prefer oven-baked bacon, cooking it evenly at a moderate temperature often reduces scorching, while producing excellent texture. That's a simple change, but small improvements practiced consistently can add up over time, because the healthiest kitchen isn't the one that's driven by fear. It's the one that's guided by understanding. And before we enjoy that first bite, there's one final chapter in our investigation. How do we know when bacon is actually safe to eat? And what is the biggest lesson this recall should teach all of us? Don't ask, did I cook it perfectly? Ask, did I avoid unnecessary extremes? That principle applies to cooking and to nutrition itself. Now, before we close our investigation, let's answer one practical question. How do we know when bacon has actually gone bad? Fortunately, the warning signs are usually straightforward. If raw bacon develops a sour or unpleasant odor, if it becomes unusually slimy or sticky, if you notice mold or significant gray, green, or fuzzy discoloration, it's time to throw it away. Don't try to trim off the bad part. Don't try to cook it longer. When food has clearly spoiled, the safest decision is to replace it. Proper storage also matters. Keep unopened bacon refrigerated. Follow the manufacturer's use by or freeze by date. And once it's open, use it within several days or freeze it if you won't be eating it soon. Freezing is an excellent way to preserve quality and reduce food waste. Now, let's come back to the question everyone asks. Is bacon healthy? I actually think that's the wrong question. A better question is, healthy compared to what? Compared to a breakfast of sugary cereal, pastries, toaster waffles with syrup, or sweetened coffee drinks? Or a breakfast built around bacon, eggs, and other whole foods may have a very different effect on blood sugar, insulin levels, hunger, and satiety. Compared to a fast food breakfast loaded with refined starches and added sugars, the conversation changes again. That's why context matters. How much are you eating? How often? How was it produced? How was it prepared? What does the rest of your diet look like? And perhaps most importantly, who is eating it? A young athlete, someone living with type 2 diabetes, a person with chronic kidney disease, or someone trying to build muscle after age 60. Those are different people with different goals and different nutritional needs. That's how physicians think, not in absolutes, in context. So what did today's bacon recall really teach us? Not that bacon is automatically dangerous, and not that bacon is automatically healthy. It reminded us that headlines rarely tell the whole story. Understanding does. So the next time a food suddenly becomes today's hero or today's villain, pause before changing what's on your plate. Ask, what actually happened? Compared to what? What's the context? Those 3 questions will serve you far better than reacting to a headline alone. Because the goal isn't to tell you what to eat. The goal is to help you understand what you're eating. Once you understand food, you're much harder to mislead. So I want to thank you for joining me for the very first episode of Food Under the Microscope. I'm Dr. Tony Hampton. And until next time, don't let headlines decide what's on your plate. Let understanding decide.